Where's that reset button?
Hello, welcome to the first episode of Devil's Advocate. This is a show where I take a look into some of the less than popular opinions over video games and other media. Now, these won't always be opinions that I share personally, but feel is at least an interesting or entertaining discussion to be had. With that out of the way, today we'll be looking at a game I actually do enjoy, Final Fantasy XIII. If you've ever been a fan of RPGs, chances are Final Fantasy has a big role to play in your love for the genre. Since the series started in 1987, the game has gone through some pretty huge changes. From 2D to 3D, from turn-based to active battle, from this thing to... whatever the hell that was. By the way, just want to say, that form, solid 10. With every game being different from the last, there might not be a more divided fan base out there. Everyone has their own favorite and least favorite Final Fantasy. In fact, almost everything about Final Fantasy is debatable. Whether you prefer the classic top-down Final Fantasies or think that the 3D ones are superior. Do you prefer the traditional turn-based games or the active battle games? Which game do they start going downhill with? Do the online ones count? Why is Gladio such an asshole? Seriously, what is up with him? One opinion is a little more common than others. Final Fantasy XIII is not a good Final Fantasy. Now, obviously not everyone feels this way, but have you ever seen a list of worst Final Fantasies? I'm willing to bet this game was at the top. Well, that or two. Man, people hate 2. Yet when the game came out, it got amazing reviews. It also sold well, selling almost 7 million copies, becoming the fastest selling Final Fantasy of all time, well, until 15. But despite all that, the game often receives a lot of flack for being too linear, the gameplay too simple, and basically just not letting players actually, play. Now, there's no doubt, this game is far from perfect, and while we do my best to help you understand just why some people love this game, I won't be shying away from the bad aspects either. With that out of the way, let's take a look at Final Fantasy XIII. The game begins with Lightning trying to save her sister Sarah from being purged from the city of Cocoon after she's turned into a l'Cie. L'Cie are people cursed by the fallacy to complete a task or focus set out by them. Fail to complete the task in time, and you get turned into a monster called a XIII. Succeed, and you're granted immortality by being turned into a crystal. Neither are really ideal options, and to make matters worse, you aren't even told what the focus is. Along the way, you meet up with other people whose lives have also been ruined by the fallacy. Snow is Sarah's fiancé and is looking for a way to save her, while also trying to take down the Empire that's purging her and all other l'Cie. Saz is looking for a way to save his son Dosh, who is also cursed, and Hope tries to find vengeance for his mother, who was killed during Snow's attack against the Empire. One thing I appreciate about this game was its willingness to innovate on the classic Final Fantasy style of storytelling. While most Final Fantasies revolve around a group of teenagers saving the world, often by way of crystals, Final Fantasy XIII does things a bit different. The main cast of the game isn't reunited for one cause. In fact, for most of the game, they don't even really like each other. Every character has their own goals, whether it's toppling an evil empire, trying to get revenge for the death of their mother, or just trying to find their family. Every character has their own motivations for what drives them. Seeing all these characters with completely different personalities interact with each other when none of them really want to be there is something I feel is pretty unique for a game. One thing I really appreciated was every character is given their own chapters. This makes the characters feel more important, as everyone is given their own time in the spotlight and aren't simply there to add numbers to the size of your party. While every character may have their own story to tell, one character in particular stands out for having the most heartfelt and emotional journey. Not you. Of course I'm talking about Saz. While a lot of Final Fantasies can be accused of just using the same character archetypes over and over, there isn't another character in the entire franchise like him. This is easily one of the most interesting and well-developed Final Fantasy characters out there. His goal isn't to save the world or topple an evil kingdom or empire. He's just trying to find the only family he has left, and the whole time you get this sense of realism from him you wouldn't expect from a Final Fantasy. He doesn't fall into the usual stereotypes of emo or bouncy or tough and brooding. He tries to be the uplifting one, even when he's debatably lost the most. He eventually starts to form a friendship with Vanille that's honestly pretty emotional at times. What starts out as these two simply trying to run away from their problems turns into what I feel is definitely the most interesting story in the game. Compared to the other characters, their dialogue is often very quiet and somber. In fact, some of the best moments in the game have little to no dialogue at all. And that's not to say the dialogue isn't good, however, and Reno Wilson does an incredible job as Saz and is often regarded as a highlight of the game. Now, I wouldn't mind the entire game with just about these two alone. It'd be kind of like a PG version of The Last of Us. In a franchise known for being so over the top, it's refreshing to see something a little more down to earth. Now that's not to say the story doesn't have its share of flaws. Some of the other voice actors do come off as a bit flat at times, and some of the writing can be downright cringy. People make baffling decisions that are bound to drive you nuts, and the characters sometimes rely too much on tropey behavior that comes off as too unnatural. Lightning has the personality of an encyclopedia on sandpaper, and yeah, it needs to be said that Hope can be pretty whiny and annoying at times. But when it does get those powerful scenes, it does so with a surprising amount of heart. Like when Sarah first finds out she's l'Cie. She knows whether she completes her focus or not, she won't be the same. Instead of telling Snow, she decides to leave him, despairing the pain of losing her. It's another one of those down-to-earth scenes you wouldn't expect from a Final Fantasy, and it seems a little reminiscent of anyone who's ever had to deal with being in a relationship with a loved one who's sick. Like I said, the writing is far from perfect and can feel pretty anime at times, but there's definitely a lot of heart in the story, and by the end you'll definitely feel the struggle through some emotional scenes and some surprising twists that I'm not going to spoil here. Now, if you've never played this game, there's probably only one thing you know about it. The game is extremely linear, taking place mostly in confined hallways, and there's no denying it, the majority of the game is played on a set track. How those Mario games less linear than this. And yeah, it does open up at about halfway through, allowing you to backtrack to do quests, but it never truly lets you explore an open world like you would expect from a Final Fantasy. Now, there's a couple reasons why I believe they made it this way. One, the technology was brand new. Final Fantasy XIII first came out in Japan in December of 2009, just 3 years after the release of next-gen consoles, while development of the game started in 2004. So the technology was obviously new and couldn't be used to its full potential. The game required 3 discs for the Xbox 360. And yes, even the remake of 7 is going to be sold as separate installments as opposed to one huge game. So instead they used the resources for the production value, focusing on things like graphics, huge set pieces, and having a more movie quality aesthetic. One thing's clear when playing this game, any shortcoming it has isn't due to lack of trying. The game is absolutely stunning and still looks amazing almost 10 years later. The second reason I believe they did it this way was to focus on the storytelling. With video games nowadays, there seems to be a huge trend of creating enormous epics full of set pieces, professional-grade voice acting, and cinematography. So naturally, Final Fantasy was bound to pick up on this as well. And with a game as big as this, there had to be some sacrifices in order to accomplish what they wanted. In an interview in 2010, director Matsumu Toriyama even said, "Cocoon is story-driven. The concept was to create 2 different gameplay experiences. Cocoon was story-driven, and Grand Pulse was an open world. Even though Cocoon may feel long, the time you spend playing each area is about half and half." And in some ways, I have to admit, it kinda worked. Now don't get me wrong, I love open world games, and I was definitely sad to see it be so contained, but I'll admit, it's definitely harder to have a focused story when you're able to do whatever you want whenever you want. Dude, your dad just died. As a result, the impact of some moments are lost. Like, I always thought it was kind of strange to see Cloud snowboarding or hanging out in the arcade just moments after his girlfriend got skewered right in front of him. You really get a feel for what's going on because of how confined the story is. It's easier to feel the toll the adventure is taking on them when the game isn't taking place over the course of 100 days, because you're busy riding chocobos or playing blitzball. Now, that's not to say I don't miss those things, of course, but it helps me understand the reason behind their choice. And even though I wish it were more open, it is kinda nice having a Final Fantasy that I can just play for the story, and not have to grind for a million hours or worry about random encounters every few steps. The other complaint I hear a lot is that this game usually just plays itself, only requiring you to hit the A button a bunch. Now, this is one I don't really get. First of all, isn't that every Final Fantasy? Hell, Final Fantasy IV DS literally had an autoplay button. Everyone knows the only fights that don't require you to just match the A button are the boss fights. And honestly, I feel like the battle system in this one is actually more engaging than a lot of the older ones. Not only do you have the usual status effects when elemental weaknesses, you now have the ability to stagger your opponent by filling up its stagger bar. Though every enemy is different, the most common method of staggering an enemy is by using magical attacks to fill the bar and then physical attacks to keep it up. Once staggered, an enemy is able to be launched, dealing even greater damage to them. In order to win more complex fights, you'll find yourself quickly switching between different classes to inflict status ailments, guard, heal, and attack with both magic and physical attacks, all while trying to stagger your opponent. Oh, and I almost forgot the summons. While the summons in most Final Fantasies are usually just long cutscenes, the summons in this game play a more active role. You actually get to control your summon in this one, trying to fill up its gauge to enter Gestalt mode, which will allow you to unleash a powerful attack. So even though the game does start out relatively easy, by the end you'll find yourself switching between different jobs in rapid succession to keep up with the changing flow of battle, trying to stagger your opponent, and trying to find when to use your summons at the appropriate time. This approach to battle keeps the fights active and engaging, and since you can only have 3 sets of jobs equipped at once, a lot of time it actually requires you to plan your fights out beforehand. So yeah, I don't really have any complaints with the gameplay. It's fast, it's engaging, and by the end, it'll definitely test your tactics as well as your reflexes.
Well, that's my review of Final Fantasy XIII. So, is it a bad Final Fantasy? I don't think so. Every Final Fantasy is different, and though this one is far from perfect, it's fun to play, it tells an interesting and fairly coherent story, and it looks and sounds amazing. Is it the worst Final Fantasy? Well, to some people it might be, and that's fine. If they didn't like that it wasn't so open, or didn't like the characters or some of the story, there's nothing wrong with it being their least favorite. The point of this wasn't to discredit anyone's opinion, but to simply give a voice to the other side of the argument. Final Fantasy has a long history, and because of that, there's limitless things to debate. But I don't see it as a bad thing, more of a testament to how far the franchise has come. At the end of the day, we're all fans of the same franchise, however. And though we might not agree on everything, I'm sure there's at least one thing we can all agree on. That the greatest Final Fantasy of all time is without a doubt Mario RPG. This is Devil's Advocate, and if you're a fan of Final Fantasy XIII, this video was for you.
Thanks so much for watching Devil's Advocate. If you have any unpopular opinions you want to see discussed, drop a comment down below. And if you liked this video, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you didn't, make sure to like and subscribe, but then call me an ass or something.